Wonderful. All right. Well, let's jump in because we are here to talk about our topic, which is conscious relationships. And I think the way I would like to start with you, Marcel, is to, we've been working together a long time. You've started your spiritual path and I was alongside you at that time. And I would just like to ask you, what did you notice in your relationships before you started your spiritual training and afterwards? What did you notice about, what was the difference for you?
Ooh, huge question. We met because I was separated from my husband, and I knew I needed to change, something in myself to improve actually my relationships. So, and that's how actually we met for the first time, the first session. Definitely, I've grown a lot in terms of taking responsibility for my thoughts, my deeds, my words. And at the beginning, I thought, no, I have no problem, no issues. It's all yours,
Right.
So that has been the main difference, is really like to understand, my shadow, but also to understand the inner child issues, and but also to understand the best part of me, and to kind of discover the light, my purpose, to make sense, also to be able to live not being dependent, or attached to the idea, or I needed like a man in my case, to be happy.
Right. I mean, all the differences that you are describing are really changes that you made in yourself. That's what I'm hearing you say, that a lot of what has changed really is you, since as you showed up in your relationships.
Oh, definitely.
Yes. Okay.
Because in the new relationship I am in currently, I think I met and I welcome this type of man, as Remy is, because I have changed. Because if I had not changed and grown spiritually, I wouldn't have been able to be open to this type of relationship. And also, when I met Remy, you were there also in Tofu during your yoga retreat in Tofu in Mozambique, and I told you, I'm like, my heart was open, like really, I decided to live in the present moment, because I really understood that I was, my future was depending on that present moment and the way I will be, open in the relationship and trusting. So for once in my life, I was really like, okay, let's go without fear.
You're right. And since then, what have been the challenges for you? I mean, in this new relationship, you started a new relationship. What have been the challenges that have kind of tempted you to go into maybe an earlier version of yourself?
And the challenge is maybe like, what can I say? When you are in the honeymoon phase,
right.
You may like something that you're like, I don't think I like this, but you don't pay attention because you're like completely overwhelmed by the love, and But then those things you didn't pay attention at the beginning. Now I'm more like, okay, it's not that they were always there, but I was not paying attention, and now I'm paying attention, and sometimes I'm cringing a bit, like I don't like this. But I think the tools now, and sometimes I can lose it, but the tools I can see is that, okay, I have the capacity to say to my partner, okay, I think actually, you could, speak more calmly or whatever. I think actually my partner is what I think actually what I don't like in sometimes, some traits in my partners actually mirroring myself. You know, sometimes I'm like, no, you know, the way you speak to me, I don't like it because it reminds me the old version of me. Wow. And I see it in himself, you know. So but most of the time I'm able to say it, but sometimes I'm like, okay, I don't have any more patience for this. So I'm like, okay. So I think those are the challenges, to be able to say, you know, with compassion and really, I think for a win-win situation, kind of, because I know if I lost it, I'm not going to solve anything, you know. So, but it's not always easy, you know, to be always patient and repeating and not really seeing any change.
Absolutely. I mean, you're speaking, I saw a quote a little bit earlier today, which I've adjusted a little bit. But I don't really know what the source of the quote is, but it spoke to me. And it says, the quote says, liberation is to be for the other who you are in your soul.
Mm.
So that would mean that you are liberated. I mean, what are you liberated from, right? You're liberated then from the wounds, from the small self that you descend into, the earlier version. But really what that means, the earlier version means the foundational wounds that you received when you were growing up, and even from lineages, from generations before, intergenerational trauma. So when you can self-regulate in real time, in other words, your partner is really irritating you and is saying stuff that is triggering you and mirroring whatever it is, that you can self-regulate in real time while it's happening, so that you can be for the other who you are in your soul, which means not in your wounded self.
Exactly,
in
like secure.
Secure, vast, allowing the other person's irritation without letting it infect you emotionally. Where there's something called emotional contagion. That when we are very close to somebody and they get irritated or they kind of lose themselves, that it triggers us into our less updated version of ourselves. And that's when you kind of get stuck in that place of, but you're not allowed to be different to me. You know, you have to agree with me. You have to think the same way as me. Because if you don't think the same way as me, then what does it say about me? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's why I have the question for you. Like, you know, like, do both life partners have to be on a spiritual journey to experience like a conscious relationship?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1 million question, right? I always get asked that question in teacher training. But what happens when my partner's not also on spiritual journey? And it is the $1 million question. Can you tolerate the difference? You know, can you allow the other person, their journey, which might be very different to your journey? It might be completely diametrically opposed. With the exception, and I have to make these exceptions, of physical violence and addiction. Now, those are the two places where it becomes a slightly more complex, because there do need to be external parties involved to really help make sure that, you know, both people are safe in those instances. But barring those instances, if your partner is, you know, a walker and not a meditator, or somebody who doesn't really believe in a spiritual reality, you know, just believes in this reality here, in the reality that we call Maya, the kind of physical manifestation. If they believe this is it, this is all that there is, and all this other stuff is really just a belief system. The reality is, of course, it is a belief system. And if you have two people with two different belief systems in a relationship, a conscious relationship is you being able to tolerate those differences without feeling like it reduces you in any way. And the only time that we get into trouble in our relationships is when we are expecting a certain outcome. So, for example, you spoke about the honeymoon phase, right? I mean, honeymoon phase is like everybody starts off in the honeymoon phase. Everybody starts off, you're in love. I mean, interestingly enough, some people start fighting straight away. But what happens in the honeymoon phase is, as you said, you see the things that you think are going to be potentially problematic, but you persuade yourself that they're not going to be. So you ignore them. But given 2 to 3 years into the every relationship, those things are going to become significant. And then either you're going to be fighting about them for the next 25 years and get stuck, or you'll leave because you can't tolerate the anxiety of somebody being different to you. You'll leave the relationship. But then generally what happens is you'll find somebody else, who's going to you're going to sort of start where you stopped. So where you stopped in your last relationship, you'll meet somebody, have the honeymoon phase, and then you'll start from that place where you're going to have to face the same things in yourself. So a truly conscious approach to a relationship is really about me. It's like, how do I self-regulate? How do I, in real time, not allow myself to go into old patterns of insecurity and woundedness, and so that we can get past that stage of going, but we have to be alike. We have to think the same. We have to do the same things. And then it will be okay. Then we'll be like the ideal couple. Actually, that isn't the ideal couple. That is a couple and it might be okay for both people. It might be like, okay, I'm okay with this. I don't really want to grow anymore. The relationship suits me as it is. And then that's fine. The problem comes, I'm just plugging in my computer here. The problem comes when one person starts growing and then expects the other person to do the same thing because it's too threatening. Or the one who doesn't want to do what you're doing, for example, they start feeling threatened because now what happens if you change so much that I don't even know who you are anymore? Are we still going to love each other? Are we still going to be able to be partners if we are so different? So I think the issue here is tolerance. It's learning tolerance. It's probably one of the peak human achievements. Is how do we tolerate difference? And we see it in our species. I mean, we really don't know how to tolerate difference. We get very threatened when people come with a different point of view. In fact, to the point where we start, wars.
Exactly. No, it's very interesting because when you were talking, I was thinking about my daughters from my first partner. We were saying, Mom, actually, you choose similar men because they have like similar, like, I don't want to say issues, but they are similar. And my daughters, and I'm like, okay, maybe I chose the same type of men, but now it's like the lesson for me is to respond differently to the same type of issues I was seeing.
Exactly. And I mean, it won't be exactly the same type of man. It will reflect the differences that you see in the new partner will reflect how you have changed and how you are. We've got a comment here. I don't want to lose this comment, so I'm sort of going to interrupt and just read it. What happens when both partners are emotionally unavailable but want to be together, and how do you release from being in a trauma bond? Wow, that's a huge question. Thanks. That's a great question. So what happens when both partners, just remember your question, Marcel, we'll come back to it. I don't want to lose this point. What happens when both partners are emotionally unavailable is really the attachment bond that formed in childhood between the child and the family of origin has been disrupted. So both partners have avoidant attachment patterns. And it feels much safer to pull away from your partner if you're feeling offended or if you're feeling threatened in any way, or even just on a normal day-to-day basis. It feels more safe. You feel more secure and more in your comfort zone when you pull away and you withdraw and you protect, you self-protect. Now, if both people do that and they're happy with it, well, then there's no problem. I don't see those couples because they're happy. They're fine with it. They don't have an issue. The couples that I see, when they do have a problem, when they are avoidantly attached to the family of origin, but there's an anxiety with it. So it's anxious avoidant. So they get anxious when they pull away, and then they will either be accusatory, accusing the partner, you don't love me, you don't pay me enough attention, and that of course then triggers an issue. And that, I think, Zinzi, is what you are referring to when you say a trauma bond, because you are linking from that place of the foundation stone wasn't correctly laid in childhood. There was a very, very insecure relationship with the primary caregivers. And feeling really threatened by that. Lena says she relates to that. Feeling very threatened by somebody pulling away because it reminds you of the trauma that you experienced in childhood, but then you continue to seek out and enact the same behavior, because to a certain extent those traumatic memories that are lodged in the what we call chitta in yoga therapy, in the collective consciousness, your memories, your storehouse of memories, your traumatic memories have hijacked your mind. So you can't really think any differently. So you're relating from both people are relating from those places of being hijacked by their traumatic memories. So you can see that the relating will be very reduced. You won't be able to be, like the quote says, who you are in your soul for the other. And then how we heal from that is that we recognize those patterns. Yeah, that's awareness, that's consciousness. So deep meditation is really how we, in any kind of Vedic meditation, where we are practicing awareness, consciousness, presence, observing, being present to what is going on in real time. You don't have to be sitting on your yoga mat. You can be, I can be talking to you and getting triggered because there's something happening in the background here, but I'm self-regulating and still able to be with you, even though there is something going on here. That's a skill that we develop in meditation, right? So developing that capacity to be aware of very uncomfortable feelings, but to stay focused, centered with your object of meditation, that's what we then generalize. We generalize that skill into our relationships. And developing that on a daily basis, even when your family of origin, when you're still living with your family of origin, recognizing that you chose that lineage. Yeah, so a conscious way of approaching those very traumatized in certain instances. And I'm going to finish this point first. In certain instances where the family of origin situation is you're physically safe, you're not being abused in any way, emotionally or physically, that you are then able to work with your spiritual training to approach whatever the triggers are in the family of origin from a different place, from a place that isn't hijacked by your trauma memories. Yeah? So, I don't know, Marcel, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, yeah, definitely. I think it's very difficult to apprehend at the beginning, but for example, if I can give a personal example, my father was very violent. He's deceased now, but and so of course you are traumatized. You see, this is what you witness as a young person. You witness this type of relationship. I thought my mother was a strong woman. She was always responding to my father, but maybe with very tough words, and he couldn't bear it, so he responded with violence. And that's, I grew up with that model. So I think in my previous relationship, I also behaved like my mother, because for me it was the model of being a strong woman. And then I realized, no, at all, at all. And wow. What I didn't like in my father, the violence, I used it in my words. So I was violent, not physically, but I was very violent with my words. I could destroy, and I believe that it also caused the end of my relationship, this type of behavior, because I was not gentle, and through my spiritual journey I learned to know I discovered the gentle Marcel, and I learned that it was a strength,
Right, absolutely. I mean, that sort of triggers a thought for me around, you can't be gentle with somebody else if you're not gentle with yourself. You know, it's an impossibility. So if there is a part of you that is bullying yourself, like I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not far enough in life, I'm not enough, basically. If there is that sort of sense inside of you, and when you grow up in a family where there's a lot of violence, I did too. When you grow up in that sort of family, you develop a dysfunctional attachment bond. It's called, you know, it's really, it's not able to feel safe with love. Because love itself, when you were growing up, your model of love anyway, you know, whatever people enacted as love was violent, and it made you feel incredibly unsafe. So then you seek out situations in your life when you have that disruption in your attachment bond. You will actually seek out relationships which will bear that belief out. It will prove that belief to yourself. You see, love isn't safe. You see, love can never be safe. And so if you don't sort of get to the point where you actually are able to stop the Ferris wheel from going around and around on the same track for yourself, that if you're not able to stop that, you'll just keep going through relationship after relationship after relationship, and you will repeat the same patterns because you haven't shifted. So, you know, what you are saying to me, and I've witnessed it, I've seen you do this, is how much gentler you become with yourself and how much less punishing, you know, that you become. Sorry, there's a comment here myself.
Yeah, sure.
It kind of sounded as though you said yoga, healing, or meditation is like multitasking. Oh, it's a brilliant question. Please explain. Yes, I will record this. Anais, we will record this and we will put it on, I don't know where we'll put it, but anyway, we'll figure it out. Those who can guide us with how to use Instagram properly. Anyway, we're doing fine, myself. But I don't know who that previous question was from. It was Miss Reiki.
Yeah.
So very interesting question, because real Vedic meditation is multitasking, right? It's being able to focus on, for example, your breath. It's being able, if that is your object of meditation, your breath is the object of meditation, then that is the sole focus for your attention. But at the other parts of your brain, which are aware of what's going on outside the room, which is aware of what's going on in your stomach, which is aware of what's going on in your knee because it's sore, or what somebody said to you, that is your awareness. And you have to train both of those. Your attention has to be trained to remain rock solid on your object of meditation, and your awareness must be trained to hold everything else without your attention being disrupted. Yeah. So it is multitasking in a way, but it is actually training two faculties of the brain. The one is attention and the other is awareness. The one is a narrowing of focus onto one thing and remaining stable there. And in order to help that process, you have to have a much broader, it's like peripheral vision. It's peripheral awareness, that you're aware of everything else that is in the environment that might pull the attention away, and then you strengthen that awareness to warn you. No, this is a thought that can actually suck you away. Because you know what happens in meditation? Those who are practiced at meditation will know what I'm talking about. That you are focusing on one thing, your mantra, your breath, whatever it is, and all of a sudden, it's 10 minutes later, and you realize, oh my goodness, I lost it. I forgot about the object of meditation. You've gone on a whole journey, all around the world in your mind with your thoughts. One thought led to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And eventually one part of your mind goes, oi, aren't you supposed to be paying attention to the breath? Right? And then what happens for many people is they get upset. It's like, oh, again, my attention wandered. But at that point, you have to be going, yes, I came back, and celebrate. Yeah? So there's many, many different things that you need to be doing while you are meditating. It is the peak practice that you can train, which is why in yoga therapy, or in yoga, traditional yoga basically, it is the state of the human being, the peak state that a human being can achieve. So Ms. Raki, I hope that answered your question. It is multitasking, but it is also very specifically structured. Mm-hmm. And it's good to get a meditation teacher, because it's not really something that you're going to just pick up along the way. You're going to encounter all the obstacles that have been documented for thousands of years. You will encounter the same obstacles as all the many people who've meditated through the centuries have encountered, and you want a guide. You want a guide to be able to tell you and show you, yeah, you're getting stuck. You know, this is where you stuck. This is the classic place. So yeah. Anyway,
we have another question.
Yes.
We have another question from Dilly Dolly at work. If you're in a relationship that repeats the past patterns, when you shift and heal, does that affect your partner positively to shift as well?
Wow. $1 million question. Do you want to say what you think, Masa?
Well, from my own experience, I think it's funny, because I was actually going to tell you that I think that my current partner loves me because of that shift. He loves that luminous part of me, that, you know, that inner light, and I think he's not ready to shift, but he's attracted to this part. And he may from time to time practice, you know, but not really engaged like properly. So I think at the very least, the partner can benefit from your shifting, at the very least.
At the very least, right? I agree. I also think that it's not really up to us to say whether somebody's shifting or not. You know, just because they're not doing what we think they should be doing, doesn't mean they're not shifting. Yes, there's no way of knowing you as what another person and how they're changing, other than by looking at their outward behavior. And that's a very, very inaccurate measure of what's happening in a person's mind. Yeah, we can look at outward behavior and believe a whole lot of things about a person, and then suddenly we realize, okay, that was all wrong. None of that was true, because they reveal themselves in a different way to us. And, you know, that's why people leave suddenly after many, many years together. They just go, well, you've never really known me, you know, because you had an idea of me. You didn't actually see me. You didn't really know me. You had your preconceived notions. So I think it's very important in a conscious relationship to be very clear around what your expectations are and what your conditioning is to expect in a relationship. Your conditioning comes from your family of origin, and it comes from your lineage. So from generations of the way in which people have related to each other and what is right and what is seen as wrong, that is what is your conditioning, and it's sitting in your chitta. Yes, or I'm in South Africa, Champ for days, and Masad is in France. So we're in two different parts of the world. In fact, Francesca was meant to join us, would have been in London, but Francesca, unfortunately, I couldn't figure out how to invite her. But getting back to the point is really being able to identify your conditioning. It's being able to see and separate from your soul, who you are in your soul, and who you are in that wounded self. Oh, there's Francesca. Hi, Francesca. She joined us. Who you are in yourself. Yeah. Your higher self and your kind of, you know, everyday self, your human self. And to be able to separate the two in real time, in every moment. Am I coming from my higher self here? Is this response that I want to give? Is it paying tribute to who I am in my soul? Or am I just going back into conditioning? And going back into a place, you know, which is locked in lineage trauma. Yeah, I think I figured out how to invite Francesca. Yeah, so I think maybe that's answered the question. Does that raise anything for you?
For me?
Hey, Francesca. Hi. Hi,
Yeah,
Francesca. Maybe just introduce yourself because you've just joined us. Lovely to have you.
cool. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Francesca. I am a theatre maker, writer, dance artist, facilitator, Kundalini yoga teacher based in London. Yeah.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So both Marcel and Francesca have trained with Kundalini Africa Rising, which is the South African organization to train teachers here locally. And the whole teacher training has now shifted away from pure Kundalini yoga into incorporating other forms of yoga. Francesca, we've just been talking, I don't know how much of this that you've heard, but maybe the question I'll ask you, the question that I asked Marcel is, since you started your spiritual journey, and you started your spiritual journey a little bit before I met you, but since you started your spiritual journey, how have your relationships changed?
That's a lovely question. Yeah, I think I'm just a lot more aware. And I mean, not that I'm going to always be super aware of myself, those around me, but I just feel like growing an awareness of myself has helped me to be more sensitive to how I relate to others, and also just has allowed me to be more honest with what my boundaries are, when something isn't sitting right with me and when my intuition is going no, so it's really that like very strong awareness that I can't let go of, because once I know something, it's like there forever. That's like what comes to mind.
Right. And how would you describe a conscious relationship? What would that look like for you?
I mean, I don't think any relationship can be like 100% perfect, but I think there's definitely space for people to grow in their own ways, also like connect and grow together, and also like that ability to know that the other person is going through what they're going through, and also acknowledge that maybe if they are projecting, it's not always about you. I think just like something to do with like space to listen, space to see each other and like really see each other, which is not always easy with everything happening in like the everyday. Small things like just kind of trying to not bring all of the noise from outside into that space, which I feel like should be quite sacred. Yeah, that's something.
Okay, so I mean, I think that what that raises for me, and I think it's a very pertinent question for everybody who's in a relationship, is when you are triggered. Yeah, when you are feeling that sense of you could in this moment get out of consciousness and go into an earlier version of yourself. What are the tools that, and this is directed to both of you, what are the tools that both of you potentially could use in those moments?
Long, deep breathing.
Right. Okay, and what does that do for you? I mean, what in your experience, what does that do?
It allows me to, pause. Really pause and feel the emotion, the trigger, like the emotion, like the irritation picking, and knowing also that it's gonna pass, and it allows sometimes to pass. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, in order to have the consciousness, self-consciousness, to know that's what you need. Yeah? Because for many people, that moment passes in a blur. And before you know it, you've just, bam, you're right back in those trauma memories, and you're reacting as if it's, you're 10 years old. Or a later version, but, you may have had many traumatic relationships, like being a person who goes for the same type of person, and therefore the trauma continues. So for many people, the awareness to catch that moment, how would you develop that?
It feels like it's just about like consciously practicing it each time. I don't like, because it feels like for me, when I've made, like in the past, for example, made decisions to choose certain people, that was obviously a habit that came from something that had like solidified itself after continuously practicing it. So I feel
Right.
like, it's about unlearning that, rewiring the brain, like what we do in yoga, So
Right.
practicing it in that way, or unlearning it, and then every time you're in the situation, just trying to be like, okay, let's, just turn this around, and hoping
Right.
that the more we do that, the more it will stick.
Absolutely. I think that's incredibly relevant. We learn through repetition, right? I mean, that's one of the sort of key things. We've got a comment here from Miss Reiki. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think my biggest problem in some of my relationships is I fail to understand people who are stiff-necked, not diverse, and so uniform. I talk to people, accept their views, acknowledge, and understand. That's what you use. Fantastic. I think that this issue of tolerance, it really is a peak human capacity, a peak human skill. But what it really means for me is you can only tolerate somebody else if you can tolerate yourself. If in that moment you have descended into self-judgment, where you don't feel good enough, where you feel you've gone into your insecurities, that moment can only really fully effectively be turned around with self-forgiveness. With being able to identify that sense of not good enough, feeling small, feeling really like reduced, and then being able to go, I forgive you. It's okay. It's okay to feel like this. What we often do is we lock down around those feelings because we feel reduced by them. We feel ashamed. I think that's the correct term. We sort of lock into our own shame. And then from shame comes the desire to either run away or fight. So being able to hear another person's point of view, what Ms. Reiki is talking about, like if somebody's got a radically different point of view to you, that capacity, and this can be your partner, it can be somebody who's in your bed, got a radically different worldview. And for some reason, your karma is that you have gotten together with that person, because you have to learn something. Kirsten has got a comment here. No, we've got somebody before Kirsten. Coco. Coco says, keep communicating with your partner, even when you feel like a 7-year-old who wants to run for the hills. Yeah. And even more than that, I would say communicate with a 7-year-old. I really communicate with that 7-year-old and be really supportive of the 7-year-old who thinks it's very unsafe to be where you are and is telling you at every moment, like, get out of here, get out, get out, get out. It's dangerous. You're going to be, something bad's going to happen. Francesca, do you want to take the next question and just see what you think about answering that?
Is that Kirsty's question?
Yeah.
Cool. Is it fair to expect the partner to intervene when one is triggered and enacting ineffective behaviors? I'll just continue to read that bit. Self-regulation is vital, but at what point is it acceptable to lean on your partner to alleviate? Okay, to expect the partner to intervene when one is triggered. That's very interesting. I think when you're in a partnership, you kind of choose to support each other. But yeah, I think it's about maybe kind of, I've never experienced a partnership where there is that like healthy support in that way, in a romantic way. But I would imagine that if there is communication around how you're able to support each other in that situation, if something had to arise, like ways that are safe to support and to also take space when you need to take space and to debrief thereafter, and then to come back and be like, maybe, we can try this next time. But I think it's also important to still within that set those boundaries for yourself, even if you are super close to someone, so that you're able to still protect yourself and still take care so that you can help take care of someone else, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Marcel, what do you think? That's a
it
really
reminds
important
me-
question.
Yes, very important question. It reminds me of a real life situation when I was triggered by my ex-partner, but my new partner was next to me, and he helped me. He really helped me snap out of the situation, because I went berserk, like really go back to my old self. And even my daughters were like, "Oh, mom, you're like, what happened?" And and then I was angry with me and with myself. But he just said like I was like under a spell, and he really like literally like, "Marcel, snap out of it," and it woke me up. And then I was like, okay, I need to calm down.
Right. Right.
Yes,
Great
I
answer.
went on a spiral, and it's awful. Yeah.
That's a great answer. I mean, that really is saying, and I suppose it's maybe slightly different to what Kirsty's asking, but I think it's very relevant to strengthen that capacity in the relationship, because your partner helped you to self-regulate.
Yes,
Of course,
because
it
in
might
that
have been
moment I didn't have
different.
the capacity.
Right.
I
Exactly.
lost that capacity in that very moment. Yeah.
Right. Right. The issue here, and this has happened to me personally, is where you lose yourself with your partner, at your partner, right? And then it's up to your partner to remain stable. It's never happened to me. It's never happened to me. Like, maybe I'm just too much when I lose it, whatever, But that capacity to stay in yourself when the attack is coming at you,
Yeah.
that's the real time we're talking about. Yeah, and I think the next question actually speaks to that. It's from Camilla, who says that's hard to meet your partner at their 7-year-old self.
Yes.
Exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So when there are two 7-year-olds who are punching and kicking, and the adults have left the room, what happens then? That I think is what perhaps, Kirsty, what you're speaking about there is quite a it's an advanced skill for you to expect your partner to be able to regulate you when you are out of yourself. That, I think, is something which is crossing a boundary. I think you can maybe expect it once, but maybe not more than once. Just taking that what we're talking about here is conscious relationships, right? So the basic premise of a conscious relationship is you remaining conscious. Conscious of yourself, conscious of the boundary, conscious of your partner and your impact on your partner. You're expecting your partner to remain untriggered when you are letting rip. That is something which may be out of their capacity. You may, over a period of years, decades maybe, if you've really worked on your relationship, have the capacity to expect that of your partner, but then you probably wouldn't lose it like that. If you've worked on yourself for several decades, you probably know at some point, hey, I got to take time out here. I've got to go and sort myself out here. I'm flooded. I can't think straight. When your trauma brain kicks in, your frontal brain shuts down, and you cannot get you can't get through that moment. So I think that the work that what Francesca, I'm hearing you say, is the work that you do on yourself is really critical in that moment. And then Dilly, I just want to read this comment. Sorry, Francesca, you have expectations of your partner through that triggered moment. And what was the expectation? The expectation that I'm referring to, I don't know if your name's Dilly, but I'll call you Dilly. The expectation that I'm referring to is the expectation that your partner will meet you and hold space for you while you are really triggered. And you are sort of, escalating. You're upping the ante. The expectation that your partner remains uninfected by your emotion may be something that is beyond their capacity. That's the expectation that I'm referring to. Sorry, Francesca, I think I interrupted you.
No stress. I was just going to ask a question, because, speak a lot about, doing the work, on ourselves. And then I know we also speak a lot about, collective healing and work. But, in a partnership, in a relationship, what's, the ideal kind of way for that healing to integrate between two people? Is that advisable to do that work together, or is it advisable to do the work by yourself first and then come together? What's thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that, and then Marcel, you can also add to what you think. From my perspective, I think it's very important for people to do their own work. So your individual journey is your individual journey, but at the same time, there is definitely space for you to be able to benefit from your partner's work and then to share a space as well. I think when it becomes symbiotic, we have to practice together, we have to do everything together, we have to do the same stuff, that can become. It can be fine for some couples. I was saying earlier in the session, it can be fine. Some people are happy with that, and that they'll remain that way for the rest of their lives. I know some couples who've been together more than 50 years. Never do anything separately, ever. Right? Everything is done together. They think the same. They've got the same opinions about stuff. And it works for them. But it may not work for others. So to have the capacity to be able to do stuff separately, different stuff, your partner's healing journey might look very different to yours. It might be bungee jumping. Who what one person's healing journey is not the same as everybody else, as anybody else. So I think that, I think it is important to do your individual work, to recognize that what we call samskaras in yoga, your tendencies, the potentials that you've come in with from your lineage are different to anybody else's, because you've chosen them specifically. Because you have a journey you've got a mission, you've got something that you need to learn. So I do think that it needs to be both, can be both. It has to be just your journey, and it can be doing it together. I don't think it has to be, though. Marcel, do you want to also just add?
Yeah, no, definitely. First of all, to develop what I say, an authentic relationship with yourself. To be able to develop then a conscious relationship with your partner. And but then when sometimes you seek guidance, or if the partner is open, and it happened to me, I think twice or three times, we consulted Ravi for, even to have a conscious, conscious conception of our baby. You see, at the type of moment is a very nice, and my partner Remy was open to it, and we did a celebration, and we call upon the universe to have the possibility to have a baby, and eventually it happened. So I think it's very important to have this type of session if your partner is open to it, to talk about issues and to try to solve, to have this type of support.
Right. I think it's very powerful. I mean, I've gone through with my partner, tantric, white tantric yoga, 3 days in a row. And we were a lot younger. We went through this, and tantric yoga, for those who don't know the form is doing meditation, long meditation practices, which are quite strenuous because they use Kundalini Yoga asana. So sometimes you would have your arms up in the air like this. Sometimes you would be holding each other up, you know, like your arms would be joined, and you'd have to sort of, you know, balance your weight for 62 minutes at a time. So the kind of communication that happens there between two people, like, are you holding your weight? You know, just like a very obviously, why are you not holding your weight? Don't put all your weight on me. You know, that sort of, that over 62 minutes, over 3 days, it really developed a very, very deep understanding of what the issues were, you know, of what we were facing in our relationship. And of not necessarily how to get through them, but certainly gave us a clear indication of where these areas of when you can lean on another person, when it makes sense. You can only really lean on another person if you're holding yourself. If you are not holding yourself and you lean on another person in this very practical example that I'm giving, you know, he's 3 times my size. So if he was not holding himself and he was leaning on me, I would collapse. I mean, there was no way I could hold that, right? So that was a symbol. It's a symbolic understanding of what it means to really have that interdependence, but really the capacity to hold yourself. Because only when that is totally in place, and that means your lifestyle choices, you know, what you do when you wake up in the morning, what you do when you greet the person who, I don't know, you know, cleaned your car, for example, just how, on every level, how do you show up? And what are the choices that you make? Yeah, so it's that capacity of holding. It's not just, you know, your meditation practice. It's across the board, how you show up in your life. And then, can you hold on to that, or are you only nice to people outside of your relationship? And when you get into the relationship, you just kind of let it all go, you know, and then you don't have to hold yourself anymore because your partner's there, and you just put yourself and all your stuff at your partner's door. Yeah. So, I mean, the critical element for me is self-consciousness. And then from there, the ability to be in relationship flows. Okay, we don't have any other comments. I mean, maybe there's some comments that the two of you would like to make. So I'll just make an announcement that I am doing a training in conscious relationships next year. It's a level 2 training, so you should ideally have some sort of awareness, understanding of yoga practice, because it's fairly intensive. It will be in February next year. The details are on my website, and it will be advertised on Instagram and stuff. And what we'll be doing over those 6 days is really developing that self-consciousness, you know, the capacity to be with yourself in a way that translates into being with others. And in, you know, we use the sutra in our Kundalini Yoga training that says that the other person is you. It's not unique. It's many cultures use that, some variation of that you are a person through other people. And it's really becoming aware of what that means. You know, how you show up and how you hold yourself and how you are able to be gentle to yourself and compassionate to the 7-year-old and the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old, etc. How you show up for those different elements in your psyche. If you think of each one of us like a disco ball, you know, those mirror balls, that every one of those mirrors is an aspect that needs to be conscious, because if it's not, it can catch you by surprise. And then suddenly you will behave in a way that is not aligned with the whole, but it's coming from just one of those little aspects, which is surprisingly strong, particularly if it's one of the inner children. That the way that those children inside of us can act out can take us completely by surprise. Like your example, Marcel, and my example, where you just lose yourself. You're just like, where did that come from? How did that happen? And that can happen to each one of us. So really knowing those different parts of ourselves. Okay, we've got a few comments here. Kirsty says, Ayanda says, oh, no, this is so hard here. Ayanda says, thank you for the tantric analogy. You're welcome, Ayanda. Camilla says, a lot of this resonates. Thank you for that. I'm glad. Kirsty says, what are the best techniques to use to remind one another of our consciousness in the relationship? Great question, Kirsty. So a powerful technique, obviously, that once you've gone beyond your self-awareness and you know, okay, I'm anxious because this reminds me of a situation when I was growing up in my family, is to be able to communicate that to your partner, not in a way that says, why aren't you showing up for me, for example, but in a way that says, I'm feeling like this. This is what I would like from you right now. And to coach each other in that consciousness, that when your partner comes to you with that vulnerability exposed, that you catch the request and you comply. Doesn't mean you're promising for the rest of time that you're going to be this person who is so compassionate and receiving, but in that moment, when your partner comes to you and says, this is what I'm feeling and this is what I need, that you have a contract between the two of you that you're able to respond. Even if you're feeling like, oh, you know, do I really have to? It's not my fault that you're feeling like this. I'm tired, you know, that you overcome that. And because you have empathy, because you have that understanding that, yeah, well, tomorrow this might be me, that you then give that. And that helps to soothe those initial attachment wounds immeasurably. To hear your partner say to you, I'm going to say exactly what you want me to say. I'm going to give you exactly what you need in this moment because I know that it's going to help you, is very healing, because many of us didn't receive that. Many of us received the opposite. Yeah, and Kyla says, conscious communication, yes, please. Absolutely. And then Kirsty, especially very early on. Oh, that comment disappeared. Can somebody see Kirsty's comment? Oh, especially very early on in discovering consciousness. Not sure I understand what you're saying there. Kirsty, maybe you can just give us a follow-on comment. Oh, yeah, I think you mean especially early on in your spiritual journey. I think. Anyway, closing comments. Thanks, everybody, for joining us and for being part of this conversation. And over to you two.
Closing comments?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for inviting me and it allows to reflect and also will share my experience with some humility, but definitely I think that when you were saying like you are able to hear and I know what I want to say, and I think this is so key that in the relationship the partner is able to say what he needs, he or she needs, you know, because but I'm going to talk mostly for the men because this is what I know, men in a relationship, that I realize, or I noticed that most men, they don't know how to say what they feel and what they need. So sometimes what they say doesn't really comes very straightforward. So you have to second guess, but actually what do you need? What do you want? But I try to be very compassionate.
That opens up it's another whole discussion. Thank you for that comment, because I think it's very, very important to distinguish that this is not actually only men. Many people cannot actually say what they are feeling. Actually, like not, I'm so angry because you did this, but I'm feeling really vulnerable. I'm really anxious right now. This reminds me of when I was growing up and I was hiding under the bed. Yeah, real vulnerability it's a skill. It's not something that many people, male, female, and everything extra on the other side of that. It's a human thing to close up and defend. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm going to come to your comment. I'm just reading this from Ms. Reiki. The segue from tantric yoga to relating it to our everyday lives. although related, seems like a tangent. How do we consciously apply that tantric yoga balance practically in everyday life? Absolutely. That's a very important question. So it's if you haven't done the tantric it would be meaningless. So thank you for that comment. But to balance your male and female energy is really what tantric yoga is about. So it's to have an awareness of what your male energy is doing in every moment and what your female energy is doing in every moment. And is there a communication between the two? Because that's what Tantra is about. So you're sitting with another person, you are balancing with that person, but actually what you're doing is you're balancing internally. So deep understanding of your communication between the male and female energy internally and how they complement each other or how they're at war, because that can happen too. Then when your male energy is dominant and starts fighting with your partner's male energy, then you're going to have a situation where it's explosive, it escalates. Or if you're in the female energy and you're kind of parking off, looking in the opposite direction, going, I'm not really interested in anything you have to say, that will enrage as well. So it's just being aware of how that interplay happens is really what I was talking about. But thanks for that clarification. Francesca, we're at our 7:30 mark, so yours will be the final comment.
No, I'm just really grateful for the invitation as well. I think this is like just scratching the surface for me, and I'm like, I want more, you know? Like,
Right.
Yeah, also it's just such a reminder that this is all such a like ongoing, everyday kind of journey, which is scary at times, but also really exciting because it's like there's room for change and like growth and development all the time, which is lovely because we have the power to change things, you know. So
absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm grateful to the two of you as well for joining, because this is how we change consciousness. Yeah. So I think our next offering, what I would like to do is to have a Zoom call where we have everybody's faces there and we have like a proper engagement, like a group consciousness engagement about this topic, because it's critical. There are some of the most pernicious ailments that our physical body manifests is due to issues in our relationships. So it's something that goes obviously very deep to the core. But thank you everybody. Thanks everybody for joining, and hopefully we will see you on the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Wonderful. Thanks, Francesca. Thanks, Marcel. Bye everybody.
Bye everybody. Bye.
Bye.